I stared at Jack, my husband of 15 years, wondering if I'd heard him correctly. You want us to move in with your mother? The words felt foreign on my tongue, like a phrase from a language I'd never learned. Jack's eyes darted away from mine, focusing on the framed photo of us on our wedding day. It's just temporary, Claire. Mom's having a hard time since Dad passed. She needs us. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. And what about what we need, Jack? What about our plans? He shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes about his indifference. Plans change. Mom's alone now. It's the right thing to do. The right thing. How many times had I heard that phrase throughout our marriage? I bit back a bitter laugh. And what does Susan think about this? She's thrilled, Jack said, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. Says it'll be like old times. Old times. When Jack was her perfect little boy, and I was just the interloper who'd stolen him away. I could already imagine Susan's critical gaze, her thinly veiled barbs about my shortcomings as a wife and daughter-in-law. Jack, I don't think. He cut me off with a wave of his hand. It's decided, Claire. We're moving next week. I felt the floor shift beneath my feet. Next week? But that's so soon. What about my job? Our house? You can commute, he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. And we'll rent out the house. It'll be good for us, you'll see. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him understand how ridiculous this all sounded. But years of keeping the peace had trained me well. Instead, I nodded, feeling like a coward. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my keys and heading for the door. Where are you going? Jack called after me. For a walk, I said, not bothering to look back. The crisp autumn air hit me like a slap to the face as I stepped outside. I walked aimlessly, my mind racing with all the implications of Jack's announcement. How had we gotten here? When had my opinions, my desires become so insignificant? Lost in thought, I nearly collided with my neighbor Sarah. Whoa there, Claire, she said, steadying me. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile. Just got some surprising news. Jack wants us to move in with his mother. Sarah's eyes widened. Susan, the woman who called you a barren disappointment at your last Christmas dinner? I winced at the memory. That's the one. Oh, honey, Sarah said, pulling me into a hug. What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't seem to have much choice in the matter. Sarah pulled back, her hands on my shoulders. There's always a choice, Claire. You just have to be brave enough to make it. As I walked home, Sarah's words echoed in my mind. I'd spent so long trying to be the perfect wife, to make everyone else happy. Maybe it was time to start thinking about my own happiness. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the unfamiliar car parked in our driveway. As I approached, I saw Jack emerge from the house, followed by a woman I'd never seen before. They were laughing, heads close together in conspiratorial intimacy. My heart stopped as I watched Jack lean in and kiss her cheek, his hand lingering on her waist. The woman climbed into her car and Jack waved goodbye, a smile on his face I hadn't seen in years. As the car pulled away, Jack turned and saw me standing there. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of panic. Claire, he said, his voice strained, I can explain. But in that moment I realized there was nothing left to explain. The perfect life I'd been desperately clinging to had been an illusion all along, and now, standing in the fading light of day, I knew that everything was about to change. The moving van pulled away, leaving me standing in Susan's driveway, surrounded by boxes and the suffocating weight of my new reality. Jack was already inside, probably basking in his mother's adoration. I took a deep breath and stepped through the front door, bracing myself for what lay ahead. There you are, Claire. Susan's voice rang out, sharp as a knife. I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind. I forced a smile, just making sure we didn't forget anything. Susan's eyes narrowed. Well, don't just stand there. Start unpacking. I want this mess cleared up before dinner. As I lugged boxes upstairs, I caught snippets of Jack and Susan's conversation from the kitchen. Their laughter felt like a personal affront, a reminder of my outsider status in this house. Claire? Jack called. Can you come down here for a sec? I descended the stairs, my guard up. Jack and Susan were seated at the kitchen table, matching expressions of false concern on their faces. Honey, Jack began, his tone sickeningly sweet. Mom and I were talking, and we think it might be best if you take the guest room for now. I blinked, sure I'd misheard. Excuse me? Susan jumped in. It's just that Jack's old room is rather small for two, and well, with your difficulties, we thought you might appreciate the extra space. My difficulties. As if my struggle to conceive was a personal failing, a defect to be hidden away in the guest room. And where will you sleep, Jack? I asked, already knowing the answer. He at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. I'll take my old room. It'll be easier for work, you know? I bit my tongue, tasting blood. This was about more than sleeping arrangements. This was about erasing me, bit by bit, from their perfect family picture. Fine, I said, my voice eerily calm. I'll take the guest room. As I turned to leave, Susan called out, "Oh, and Claire? Be a dear and start on dinner, won't you? I'm famished." That night, lying alone in the cold guest room, I replayed the scene I'd witnessed in our driveway. The woman, the kiss, Jack's panicked expression when he saw me. I'd been too shocked then to confront him, but now, anger bubbled up inside me. I crept downstairs, intent on finally having it out with Jack. But as I approached his door, I heard hushed voices. "You need to be more careful, Jack," Susan whispered. "What if Claire had seen you?" My breath caught in my throat. "Don't worry, Mom," Jack replied. "Claire doesn't suspect a thing. She's too busy trying to be the perfect wife to notice what's right in front of her." I stumbled back, my hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. Susan knew. She'd known all along about Jack's affair, and worse, she was helping him hide it. Rage, hot and fierce, coursed through me. I wanted to burst into the room, to scream and throw things, but a small, calculating voice in my head held me back. If I confronted them now, they'd only deny it. No, I needed proof. I needed to play their game better than they did. Back in the guest room, I pulled out my phone and dialed Sarah's number. "Claire?" She answered, groggy with sleep. "What's wrong?" "I need your help," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'm going to take down Jack and Susan, and I need you to be my alibi." There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice came back, fully alert. "I'm listening." As I outlined my plan, a sense of purpose washed over me. For years, I'd let Jack and Susan dictate my life, my worth. But no more. They thought they had me cornered, isolated in this house of lies. But they'd underestimated me. Let them think I was the perfect, obedient wife. Let them believe I was clueless and weak. I'd play the part, all while gathering the evidence I needed to blow their carefully constructed world apart. The game was on, and this time I intended to win. The fertility clinic's waiting room was a study in quiet desperation. I sat alone, surrounded by couples holding hands and whispering encouragement. Jack had begged off, claiming an important meeting. I knew better now. "Claire Thompson?" The nurse's voice cut through my thoughts. I followed her to the examination room, my heart heavy. Dr. Patel greeted me with a sympathetic smile. "I'm afraid I don't have good news, Claire," she said gently. "The latest round of treatments hasn't been successful." I nodded, numb. How many times had I sat in this room hoping for a miracle? "Have you and Jack considered other options?" Dr. Patel asked. "There are still avenues we could explore." "I'll discuss it with him," I lied, knowing full well that Jack had lost interest in our fertility journey long ago. As I left the clinic, my phone buzzed. A text from Susan, "Dinner at 6. Don't be late." I arrived home to find Susan in the kitchen, a whirlwind of activity. "There you are," she said, barely looking up. "Start chopping those vegetables. Jack's bringing a guest." My stomach clenched. "A guest?" "Yes, his new assistant. Amanda, I think her name is. Lovely girl." I nearly sliced my finger, my hand shaking with sudden realization. "Amanda, the woman from the driveway." "Oh, and Claire?" Susan's voiced with false concern. "You might want to freshen up. You look a bit worn." I bit back a retort and headed upstairs. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed older, tired. When had I become this shadow of myself? The sound of laughter drifted up from downstairs. I recognized Jack's voice, followed by a lilting female laugh that set my teeth on edge. I descended the stairs slowly, steeling myself. Jack stood in the living room, his arm casually draped over a young woman's shoulders. She was everything I wasn't. Young, vibrant, carefree. "Claire!" Jack called out too loudly. "Come meet Amanda. She's been a godsend at the office." I shook Amanda's hand, noting how she leaned into Jack. "It's so nice to finally meet you," she gushed. "Jack talks about you all the time." "Does he now?" I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Throughout dinner, I watched Jack and Amanda, noting every shared glance, every accidental touch. Susan beamed at them, playing the perfect hostess. "So, Amanda," Susan said, refilling her wine glass, "do you plan on having children someday?" Amanda blushed. "Oh, I'd love to. I've always wanted a big family." "Unlike some people," Susan muttered, her eyes flicking to me. The room fell silent. I set down my fork, the clatter echoing in the sudden quiet. "I'm sorry, Susan," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Susan waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, nothing, dear. It's just, well, you've been trying for so long. Maybe it's time to accept that motherhood isn't in the cards for you." I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Excuse me," I managed, fleeing to the kitchen. I gripped the counter, trying to steady my breathing. The kitchen door swung open, and Jack entered. "Claire, what's wrong with you?" he hissed. "You're embarrassing me." I turned to face him, years of pent-up anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. "What's wrong with me? You bring your mistress to dinner and ask what's wrong with me?" Jack's face paled. "Keep your voice down," he warned. "It's not what you think." "Isn't it?" I challenged. "Tell me, Jack. Tell me I'm wrong." He opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to form the lie. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I'd spent years trying to be the perfect wife, enduring Susan's jabs, Jack's indifference, the painful fertility treatments. For what? For this farce of a family? I brushed past Jack, back into the dining room. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me expectantly. "I have an announcement," I said, my voice ringing clear. "I'm not pregnant. I'll never be pregnant. And you know what? I'm done trying." With that, I walked out of the house, leaving behind a stunned silence. As I stood in the driveway, the cool night air on my face, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. The game had changed, and I was finally ready to play by my own rules. I found myself at my mother's doorstep, tears streaming down my face. She opened the door, took one look at me, and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, stroking my hair. "What's happened?" Inside, over a steaming mug of tea, I poured out everything. Jack's affair, Susan's cruelty, the failed fertility treatments. Mom listened, her face a mix of concern and barely contained anger. "Claire," she said when I'd finished, "why are you putting yourself through this?" I stared into my tea, searching for an answer. I wanted the family I never had growing up, the perfect marriage, the white picket fence, the whole package. Mom's eyes softened. "Oh, honey, is that what this has all been about?" She reached for an old photo album, flipping to a picture of us from years ago. There we were, just the 2 of us at my high school graduation, beaming at the camera. "Look at us," she said. "We might not have been the traditional family, but we were happy, weren't we?" I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "You don't need a man or a baby to complete you, Claire. You're already whole." Her words hit me like a tidal wave, washing away years of insecurity and doubt. I'd been so focused on creating the perfect family that I'd lost sight of what truly mattered, my own happiness and self-worth. "What do I do now?" I asked, feeling both liberated and terrified. Mom squeezed my hand. "You fight. Not for Jack or that sham of a marriage, but for yourself." The next morning, I returned to Susan's house with a renewed sense of purpose. I found Jack in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. "Where were you?" he demanded. I was worried sick. I almost laughed at the absurdity of his concern. "I needed some time to think," I said calmly, "and I've made a decision." Jack's eyebrows shot up. "Oh? I'm moving out," I stated, my voice steady. "This isn't working, Jack. It hasn't been for a long time." He set down his mug, his face a mask of disbelief. "You can't be serious. What about our family? Our future?" "What family?" I countered. "The one where you cheat on me and your mother covers for you? The one where I'm constantly reminded of my failures?" Jack's face paled. "You know about Amanda?" "Yes, I know. I'm not as blind as you think I am." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Claire, please, we can work this out. I'll end things with Amanda, I promise." For a moment, I wavered. This was everything I'd wanted to hear for so long, but then I remembered my mother's words, and my resolve strengthened. "It's too late, Jack. I deserve better than this." As I turned to leave, Susan appeared in the doorway, her face twisted with anger. "You ungrateful little," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you?" I stood my ground, meeting her gaze. "You've done nothing but tear me down, Susan. But I'm not your punching bag anymore." I brushed past her, heading upstairs to pack my things. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I heard raised voices from below. Jack and Susan were arguing, their words muffled but their tones clear. Suddenly there was a crash, followed by silence. Alarmed, I crept down the stairs. In the living room, I found Jack on his knees, surrounded by shattered glass. Susan stood over him, her face a mask of cold fury. "You fool," she spat. "I told you to be careful, now look what you've done." Jack looked up, his eyes meeting mine. In that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before, fear. "Claire," he whispered, "there's something you need to know." I stood frozen, caught between the urge to flee and a desperate need to uncover the truth. Whatever Jack was about to reveal, I knew it would change everything. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the room, ready to face whatever came next. I stood in the living room, my heart pounding as I waited for Jack to speak. Susan's eyes darted between us, a mix of fury and fear in her gaze. "Claire," Jack began, his voice trembling, I can't have children." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. "What?" I whispered, struggling to comprehend. Jack couldn't meet my eyes. "I've known for years, long before we got married." The room spun around me as the implications sank in. All those fertility treatments, the disappointments, the blame I'd shouldered, it had all been for nothing. "You let me think it was my fault," I said, my voice rising. "You watched me go through treatment after treatment, knowing all along." Susan stepped forward, her face a mask of cold indifference. "It was for the best, Claire. We couldn't let people know Jack was defective." I recoiled at her words, disgust rising in my throat. "So you both decided to let me suffer instead, to make me feel like a failure?" Jack reached for me, but I jerked away. "I'm sorry, Claire. I was afraid you'd leave me if you knew the truth." A bitter laugh escaped me. "And this was better? Lying to me for years, making me think I was broken?" "You don't understand," Susan hissed. "Our family name, our reputation." "Your reputation?" I cut her off, fury building inside me. "Is that all you care about?" Suddenly, a memory flashed through my mind. Susan's smug face as she introduced Amanda at dinner. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "That's why you brought Amanda into our lives," I said, turning to Susan. "You were trying to get Jack an heir, weren't you? With or without my knowledge." The guilty look that passed between Jack and Susan confirmed my suspicions. I felt physically ill. "How long?" I demanded. "How long have you been planning this?" Jack's silence was answer enough. I turned to leave, unable to bear another moment in their presence. "Claire, wait," Jack called after me. "Please, we can work this out. We can adopt or—" I whirled around, years of pent-up anger and hurt pouring out. "Work what out, Jack?" "The years of lies, the manipulation, the fact that your mother was basically pimping you out to your assistant?" Susan gasped, affronted. "How dare you? Everything I've done has been for this family." "No," I said, my voice cold. "Everything you've done has been for yourself, for your precious reputation." I turned to Jack, seeing him clearly for the first time. "And you're no better. You were willing to let me believe I was the problem rather than face the truth." Jack's face crumpled. "I love you, Claire. Please don't go." For a moment, I wavered. Despite everything, a part of me still longed for the life I'd dreamed of, the family I'd never had. But then I remembered my mother's words. I was already whole. "Love isn't supposed to hurt like this," I said softly. "It's not supposed to make you feel small and worthless." I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. "I'm leaving," I announced. "Not just this house, but this marriage. I deserve better than lies and manipulation." Susan sneered. "And where will you go? You have nothing without us." I met her gaze, standing tall. "I have myself, and that's more than enough." As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Sarah. "How'd it go? Do you need backup?" I smiled, realizing I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. With newfound determination, I typed my reply. "It's over. Can I crash at your place tonight? We have some planning to do." As I hit send, I knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning of my story, not the end. I'd been staying at Sarah's for a week, plotting my next move when the call came. Jack's voice crackled through the speaker, urgent and pleading. "Claire, please, we need to talk. Mom's in the hospital." My first instinct was to hang up, but something in his tone gave me pause. What happened? She collapsed. The doctors, they're not sure. Please, Claire, I need you. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing to meet him at the hospital. As I walked through the sterile corridors, my mind raced. Was this another manipulation? A ploy to get me back? I found Jack in the waiting room, his face pale and drawn. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I'd fallen in love with, vulnerable and lost. How is she? I asked, keeping my distance. Stable for now. They're running tests. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. Thank you for coming. We sat in uncomfortable silence until a doctor approached. Mr. Thompson, your mother is awake. She's asking for both of you. Surprised, I followed Jack to Susan's room. She lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller and frailer than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes locked onto mine as we entered. Claire, she said, her voice weak. I need to tell you something. Jack tensed beside me. Mom, maybe now's not the time. No, Susan interrupted. She needs to know. I can't carry this anymore. I stepped closer, curiosity overriding my caution. What is it, Susan? She took a shaky breath. Jack's affair. It wasn't his idea. It was mine. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. What? I pushed him into it, Susan continued, tears forming in her eyes. I thought if he got another woman pregnant, we could pass the child off as yours. Save the family name. I staggered back, feeling as if I'd been physically struck. You orchestrated all of this? Jack reached for me, his face a mask of shame. Claire, I'm so sorry. I should have stood up to her, should have told you the truth. But I was beyond hearing his apologies. Years of pain, humiliation, and self-doubt crashed over me like a tidal wave. Every snide comment, every accidental meeting with Amanda, every fertility treatment I'd endured, it had all been part of their sick plan. How could you? I whispered, my voice shaking with rage. How could you do this to me? Susan's face crumpled. I was trying to protect our family, our legacy. I never meant what? I cut her off, my voice rising. Never meant to destroy my self-esteem? Never meant to make me feel worthless and broken? Never meant for me to find out? Jack stepped between us. Claire, please, she's sick. We can talk about this later. But I was done waiting, done being silenced. No, we'll talk about it now. You both used me, manipulated me, lied to me for years. And for what? Your precious family name? I turned to Susan, years of pent-up anger pouring out. You know what, Susan? You didn't just fail to protect your family. You destroyed it. Congratulations. With that, I stormed out of the room, ignoring Jack's calls behind me. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, struggling to breathe. The weight of their betrayal pressed down on me, threatening to crush me entirely. But beneath the pain and anger, I felt something else stirring, a fierce determination. They had taken so much from me, but I refused to let them take anything more. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Everything okay? Need an escape plan? I smiled grimly, a plan forming in my mind. It was time to take back control, to show Jack and Susan exactly what I was capable of. I typed back, meet me at the house. It's time to end this. On my terms. As I left the hospital, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The final battle was coming, and this time, I was ready for war. The dining room buzzed with chatter as our friends gathered for what they thought was a simple dinner party. Little did they know, they were about to witness the implosion of my marriage. I moved through the room, a forced smile plastered on my face, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Jack hovered nearby, his eyes following me nervously. He knew something was off, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Claire, darling. Susan's saccharine voice cut through the noise. She'd insisted on attending, despite her recent hospital stay. Everything looks lovely. I turned to her, my smile never wavering. Thank you, Susan. I'm so glad you could make it. As our guests took their seats, I caught Sarah's eye across the table. She gave me a subtle nod, reminding me of our plan. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Jack stood to make a toast, raising his glass. To friends, family, and new beginnings, he said, his eyes meeting mine in a silent plea. I let him finish, waiting for the perfect moment. As the clinking of glasses subsided, I slowly rose to my feet. I'd like to make a toast as well, I announced, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. Jack's face paled. Claire, what are you doing? I ignored him, addressing our friends instead. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Your friendship has meant the world to me, especially during difficult times." A hush fell over the room. I could feel all eyes on me waiting. "You see," I continued, "Jack and I have been going through some challenges lately, fertility issues among other things." Susan shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Claire, perhaps this isn't the time." "Oh, I think it's the perfect time, Susan," I cut her off, my voice sharp. "After all, you've played such a crucial role in our marriage. Why don't you tell everyone about your brilliant plan?" Jack stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Claire, stop this. Now." But I was beyond stopping. Years of pain and anger fueled my words. "Did you know that Jack can't have children? That all those fertility treatments I went through were for nothing?" Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Jack's face was ashen, his eyes pleading. "But that's not even the best part," I pressed on, my voice rising. "Tell them, Jack. Tell them about Amanda." "Who's Amanda?" someone asked. I laughed, a bitter sound. "Oh, just the woman Jack's been sleeping with. At his mother's suggestion, I might add." The room erupted into chaos. Friends looked between Jack and me, shock and disbelief on their faces. Susan attempted to interject, but I silenced her with a glare. "You see, Susan here thought it would be a great idea for Jack to get another woman pregnant, pass the baby off as mine to save the precious family name." Jack lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "Claire, that's enough." I wrenched away from him, tears stinging my eyes. "No, Jack, it's not nearly enough. For years, I've been manipulated, lied to, made to feel worthless. Well, I'm done." I turned to our stunned friends. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this, but I couldn't let their lies continue. I couldn't let them win." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Jack stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and shame. Susan had her head in her hands, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. As I looked around at the faces of our friends, some sympathetic, others horrified, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The truth was out. There was no going back now. "I think it's time for me to go," I said quietly, gathering my things. As I walked towards the door, I heard Jack's broken voice behind me. "Claire, please, don't leave." I paused, turning to face him one last time. "I'm not leaving, Jack. I'm escaping." With that, I stepped out into the cool night air, leaving behind the shattered remains of my old life. As I walked away from the house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it, on my own terms. The morning sun streamed through the windows of my new apartment as I sipped my coffee, savoring the quiet. It had been 3 months since the dinner party, 3 months of rebuilding my life piece by piece. The divorce papers sat on the coffee table, signed and ready to be filed. A knock at the door startled me from my reverie. I opened it to find Jack standing there, looking haggard and desperate. "Claire," he said, his voice hoarse. "Please, can we talk?" I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. We sat across from each other, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. "I've left Susan's house," Jack began. "I've ended things with Amanda. I want to make this right." I studied him, searching for any trace of the man I'd once loved. "It's too late for that, Jack. You know that, don't you?" He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "I know. I don't know how to live without you." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old longing, the desire to comfort him. But then I remembered all the lies, all the pain. "You'll learn," I said firmly. "Just like I did." Jack's gaze fell on the divorce papers. "So this is really it, then?" I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. "It is. I hope you find happiness, Jack, but it won't be with me." As he left, I felt a chapter of my life closing. But instead of grief, I felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. Later that day, I met Sarah for lunch. She grinned as I approached, raising her glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said. I clinked my glass against hers, smiling. "And to true friends." As we ate, Sarah leaned in conspiratorially. "So, have you thought about what's next? The world's your oyster now, Claire." I paused, considering. "You know, I think I might go back to school, finish that degree I put on hold when I got married." Sarah beamed. "That's my girl. Show them what you're made of." As we finished our meal, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Proud of you, sweetheart. Dinner tonight?" Warmth spread through my chest. Throughout this ordeal, my mother had been my rock, reminding me of the strength I'd inherited from her. That evening, as we sat in her cozy kitchen, Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "How are you really doing, Claire?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I took a deep breath, considering the question. "I'm okay," I said slowly. "Better than okay, actually. For the first time in years, I feel like myself again." Mom nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You know, when your father left, I thought my world had ended, but it was just beginning. Sometimes we have to lose everything to find ourselves." Her words resonated deep within me. I thought of all the years I'd spent trying to fit into the mold of the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law, how I'd lost myself in the process. "I think I'm ready to start living for myself," I said, surprised by the conviction in my voice. Mom smiled, pride shining in her eyes. "That's my brave girl." As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was excited about the journey. Back in my apartment, I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. I thought of Jack, of Susan, of the life I'd left behind. There was sadness there, yes, but also a profound sense of freedom. I picked up a framed photo from my bedside table. Me at my college graduation, young and full of dreams. I traced my younger self's smile, remembering the hope and ambition I'd once had. "Time to dream again," I whispered to myself. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was older, wiser, with a few more lines around her eyes. But there was a spark there that I hadn't seen in years, a spark of possibility, of life yet to be lived. I smiled at my reflection, feeling a surge of excitement for the future. The journey wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for it, ready to rediscover the woman I'd always been meant to be. As I drifted off to sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. This isn't the end of my story, it's just the beginning.
That day, I was working from home, staying in my study room since morning. I could hear my husband Josh, whom I had remarried, and his daughter chatting cheerfully. It was the first time I'd heard them talking with such excitement. Out of curiosity, I quietly moved closer to the hallway, trying to listen in. Then I heard something that I couldn't believe.
"It's way more peaceful without that annoying wife around."
Annoying wife? Was he talking about me? Trying to remember the term annoying, I quickly searched my mind for the meaning. I referred to something lowly or disrespectful. Is that really how he saw me? I was reeling from the shock, processing his words. Then my stepdaughter's voice chimed in.
"We still need her for my college fees, though. We can't do without that human ATM.
Human ATM? Were they really calling me that? She was always asking for more allowance and didn't seem to study seriously. Despite that, I had tried my best to support her, believing it was my role as a mother figure. I thought it was just a phase, and she'd settle down eventually. But no, they were using me right from the start. They only needed me for money, without any affection or respect. I turned back as quietly as I could and returned to my room. I started packing my essentials into a suitcase. When they left the house to go out to eat, I took the chance to slip away, leaving the house. It was too late for regrets now. Just because I was lonely didn't mean I wanted to be with anyone. If all they needed was my money, then I had no reason to stay. My name is Emily, and I'm a mid-level accountant. For 15 years, I've worked in accounting, always steady and dedicated. After my first marriage ended, I focused on advancing my career. Even during my toughest times, I stayed committed to my work, knowing it was my lifeline. When I decided to change jobs, I focused solely on accounting positions. Now I work in the finance department of a large pharmaceutical group, doing most of my work remotely. The company specializes in developing medical treatments, even working with overseas clients. Because of this, my salary is a bit higher than average, and I enjoy my work immensely. In fact, my work helped me get through the hardship of my divorce. My first husband, Zach, struggled with alcohol dependency. At first, it seemed like he only drank a bit too much, but over time, it became a daily habit. Zach had unresolved issues from his past, things that my support alone couldn't heal. He needed counseling or even a structured program to help him stop drinking. However, he refused any help. I believe he wasn't ready to make the difficult commitment to recovery. His struggles weren't his fault, but it was painful to live alongside someone going through it. Because I was working full-time, supporting us financially became natural for me. Even after the divorce, I never felt lost because I knew I could rely on my own skills. I eventually transitioned to a better-paying job and grew in my career, and I've become financially stable. At times, I wondered if I was meant to live my life without the need for a family, just focusing on work. Then, I met Josh and his daughter, Lily. Josh was a salesperson at a pharmaceutical company, often visiting our office as part of his job. Though he wasn't very assertive, something about his gentle nature appealed to me. I think it was my nurturing instinct that made me want to support him. Looking back, I realize I'm often drawn to men with vulnerabilities.
I'm not very efficient at things. I'm doing my best as a single dad to raise Lily, but it's tough.
When we first went out to dinner, Josh shared his struggles with me. He was divorced too, because his ex-wife had been unfaithful. It made sense to me that his daughter would choose to stay with him. Josh was often anxious about his income and worried about Lily's future.
I've been thinking about finding a job with better pay, but I've already switched jobs 4 times.
Although switching jobs isn't necessarily bad, I felt uneasy hearing him say it was a repeated cycle. I wondered if he was taking the time to reflect on what wasn't working. I was worried that if he didn't understand why things weren't working out, he'd end up in the same situation again. Changing environments without personal growth wouldn't bring different results. Job changes are risky if you're not actively learning from each experience. I felt that to increase his income, he needed to grow personally as well. When I asked him what his strengths were, his response was underwhelming.
I'm not sure. I just feel like I keep failing and it's getting discouraging.
Failures are valuable learning experiences. In fact, people who succeed often learn from their mistakes. I shared with Josh that failures are essential for growth, and each setback is a lesson. But he only sighed and folded his arms, clearly uncertain.
But I'd need knowledge first, right?
His reluctance to try before having perfect knowledge made me wonder if he was just making excuses. It became apparent that he had no real desire to make changes or put in the work. I started realizing he was more content with fantasizing about success than actively working toward it. Yet I still thought I could support him if he genuinely wanted to improve. I told him that, even if he struggled in finding a better job, my income would be stable enough to support us. But he interpreted my reassurance differently than I had intended.
Thanks, Emily. Honestly, being an employee doesn't suit me, so this is a relief. I'm not planning to quit now, but it's nice to know I don't have to worry as much about increasing my income.
His response left me feeling a bit uneasy, as if he was placing the financial responsibilities solely on me. Still, I tried to brush it off, thinking he'd eventually find his footing. When we got married, I met Lily for the first time. She scanned me up and down with a critical look before bluntly asking,
So, what exactly do you bring to the table? Good job? Decent salary?
Her words took me aback. After a few seconds of silence, I realized she was basically questioning my worth. I was sweating with embarrassment. Though I didn't consider myself especially attractive or charming, I was taken aback by her bluntness. I started to worry about whether I'd be able to build a relationship with such a straightforward teenager.
Lily, that's rude.
I didn't mean anything by it.
I held back a retort, not wanting to cause conflict on our first meeting.
So, what kind of work do you do, Emily?
Her curiosity surprised me, so I shared my job with her honestly. I hoped my experience might inspire her or give her ideas for her own future. Well, I work in accounting. Do you know what accountants do?
Yeah, like handling expense reports or reimbursements.
That's part of it, but there's a lot more involved. I tried explaining my role in accounting to Lily in simple terms. My responsibilities included handling monthly closings, preparing consolidated reports, and financial strategy. I explained that I manage transactions, prepare reports for the parent company, and create financial strategies. Hoping to make my job sound relevant, I explained how these tasks required analytical and management skills.
So what kind of qualifications do you need for that job?
Well, you need accounting certifications, and if you want to advance, experience in finance or banking is helpful. I added that in accounting, experience matters as much as education. I hoped Josh would gain some appreciation for the expertise my work demanded. Other than that, you need to be able to manage budgets, oversee financial planning, and work with a team. Lily, however, looked completely uninterested. Josh chimed in, adding his own question about my workload and earnings.
That sounds pretty busy. How much do you make doing all that?
For a moment, I almost answered truthfully. I was just shy of a 6-figure salary, and that was my goal to achieve someday. But then I noticed Lily giving a smug look, so I chose to give a vague answer. Let's just say it's a bit above average for an accountant. Lily made a bored noise, glancing at Josh as if they were silently communicating. Watching them interact, I felt like an outsider. I tried to lighten the atmosphere by continuing to explain more about accounting, but my explanations seemed to fall flat. I reminded myself that it was just the beginning, and building a family takes time. I was determined to support both Josh and Lily and be part of their lives. If it came down to it, I could support Lily's education financially if necessary. However, I was unaware then of Josh's actual intentions. It soon became clear that he was planning to rely on my income from the start. And his hope was to put Lily in an expensive private university that accepted students based mostly on tuition. Once we started living together, I began to notice things that troubled me. I noticed that Lily often skipped her tutoring sessions without telling me. One day, the tutoring center even called to inform me that she hadn't shown up. "Hey Lily, what happened with tutoring today?" I knocked on her door, and she replied with a bored tone.
I decided to attend remotely today.
Though the center used to offer remote learning, they had returned to in-person sessions recently. Besides, if she was missing classes, the center wouldn't have reached out to me. I began to worry about her commitment to college prep, wondering if she truly had the motivation. If you're struggling with any subjects, I can help you review if you'd like.
Why would I need help?
I just thought maybe I could help. You might feel more comfortable asking me questions. Lily let out a heavy sigh, clearly irritated.
Look, I don't need any of that. It's kind of weird that you're trying to act all motherly.
My offer wasn't meant to insult her, but she took it the wrong way. I instantly regretted offering. She might already feel pressure or frustration about her studies, and I didn't want to add to it. I quickly apologized, telling her to go at her own pace, but I knew the issue was more serious. Missing tutoring would impact her, especially with college prep programs that move at a fast pace. Without a strong commitment, it would only become harder for Lily to catch up. I wondered if Josh knew about Lily's tendency to skip her tutoring sessions. They seemed to have a close relationship, but perhaps there were things he was unaware of. Josh, can we talk about Lily's studies for a minute?
Sure. What's going on?
Please, don't scold her, but her tutoring center has called a few times. It seems she hasn't been attending regularly.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. She's always hated studying.
He sighed, as if it were something he had accepted long ago.
She's got her eye on a private university, you know. One that'll take her as long as we can pay the tuition.
Josh smiled as he said this, as if it were a simple solution. I found this approach troubling. Perhaps Lily didn't feel motivated because she assumed her parents would simply take care of everything. But it didn't feel right to point this out as her stepmother. So I simply nodded and tried to move on from the topic. I returned to my room preparing for an online meeting as part of my remote work. With my new work schedule, I now worked from home twice a week. This arrangement allowed me to spend more time at home and keep an eye on things. It also gave me more opportunities to observe both Josh and Lily's behaviors. Little by little, my earlier worries about their intentions started to resurface. I couldn't shake the feeling that they might be expecting me to fund Lily's entire college tuition. I had no problem supporting her dreams, but I didn't want to be taken advantage of. As the days passed, I started noticing other behaviors that concerned me even more. Sometimes Josh would sleep in on weekdays or return home early in the afternoon. One morning I walked into the living room and was surprised to see him home.
Oh hey, you're here.
Yes, it's my work from home day. Are you off today?
Actually, I took the morning off. I was really tired from a late night of work yesterday.
But as I looked around, I could smell the faint trace of alcohol in the air. It seemed more likely that he'd been out drinking rather than working late. I let it slide, but it became clear that there were more mornings like this than I had noticed before. Josh often talked about how he never seemed to fit in at work, and I had originally thought he was just unlucky. But now I began to suspect it was something else entirely. Perhaps his work habits were part of the problem. And soon I would find out the full extent of what he and Lily had been hiding from me. One morning, I accidentally overslept by about 30 minutes because I hadn't been feeling well. I knew I only needed to be ready for a 10 a.m. online meeting, so I planned to relax a bit before the day started. Half asleep, I could hear voices coming from the living room downstairs. I looked at the clock, and to my surprise, it was already 9 a.m. Why were their voices at this time? Josh should have left for work, and Lily should be at school. I tiptoed down the stairs to listen.
Dad, are you taking the day off again?
Of course. I'm already using up my vacation days. Might as well use them before I quit.
Wait, are you really quitting?
I'll be technically between jobs. Not a slacker, just, taking some time to think.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was he really planning on quitting his job without telling me?
Well, I'm just a student, so I don't have to worry about jobs yet.
They both kept talking casually, as if they had no real responsibilities. It was then that I overheard the words that shattered any illusion I still held about them.
Life's so much more peaceful without the annoying wife around.
Annoying wife? Was he really referring to me that way? I quickly recalled the term, realizing that he was implying I was an inconvenience to him. As I absorbed his words, I felt a mixture of shock and disbelief. Then I heard Lily's voice chime in casually, adding insult to injury.
But we can't have her gone completely. I still need her around for college expenses, right?
I froze. Did they really think of me as nothing more than an ATM? The notion that a high school student would say that about me was beyond disrespectful. My head spun as I processed what I'd just heard. Could it be that from the beginning they had only seen me as a source of financial support? I began to piece things together, realizing the truth was likely worse than I'd imagined. I carefully stepped back, returning to my room, barely making a sound. I quickly grabbed my largest suitcase and began stuffing it with essentials. Then, when I heard them head out to eat, I seized the opportunity to leave without a word. I knew staying any longer would only continue to drain me emotionally and financially. I had tolerated so much, believing that with time, they would change. But they'd taken my kindness for weakness, and enough was enough. As I walked out, I felt both a weight lifting from me and a pang of sadness. But I was determined not to let their disrespectful view of me define my self-worth. I knew my next steps would involve focusing on rebuilding my life on my own terms. I left my filled-out divorce papers on the desk, knowing that once he saw them, he would understand my resolve. I rented a modest monthly apartment close to my workplace, grateful for a space of my own. Though it was small, the location was convenient, and I had some peace and privacy. The calls started almost immediately. Josh left multiple messages, which I ignored, suspecting he was only calling out of desperation. A month passed without any real contact, though his attempts only increased. I knew he was calling because he was in a difficult situation, not out of affection. He'd seen the divorce papers, which should have been enough to show him I was serious. Then, late at night, my phone began to ring persistently. This time, it was Lily. I imagined the realization hitting them that their ATM was no longer available. But deep down, I didn't feel any sympathy for their situation. They had taken me for granted, thinking they could live off my hard work. At last, around midnight, Josh called again. I sighed, picking up, ready to put an end to this once and for all. It's late, Josh. This is highly inappropriate.
Emily, finally. Where are you?
He sounded genuinely worried, but I knew better. That's not important. Just file the divorce papers, Josh.
What? Divorce? Why? I don't even understand what's going on.
His feigned confusion only fueled my frustration. The time for playing dumb was over, and I wouldn't let his words sway me. You know exactly why. You've said enough.
Look, we need to talk. Lily's planning on attending open house events, and she really wants you there too.
I felt the anger rising as I realized he was trying to involve me financially again. Right, the one for the private college. I heard the entrance cost is steep. Josh hesitated, likely realizing I knew more than he thought.
Well, yes, but you know how important it is for her to be prepared.
He tried to use Lily as a way to manipulate me back, assuming that her needs would make me reconsider. But I couldn't shake the disrespect and disregard they'd shown me. This time, I wouldn't give in to emotional blackmail. Josh, maybe it's time you faced reality. Supporting Lily is your responsibility, not mine. His silence was all the confirmation I needed. This chapter was over, and I finally felt at peace. Days passed with no real response from Josh, except for a few more late-night messages from him and Lily. They clearly didn't understand that I was returning to their lives as a backup plan. I kept ignoring the calls, focused on creating a new life on my terms. But one night, as I was relaxing after work, my phone buzzed with yet another call. This time, I decided to pick up, hoping to settle things once and for all. Josh, what do you need now?
Emily, please. You have to help us out. Lily really needs you.
No, she needs her father to step up, not me. I'm done being your ATM.
But you know things have been tough. I lost my job.
His tone was pleading, but I knew he was only sorry about the lack of financial support. Maybe it's time to find a stable job and take some responsibility.
Can't we just talk this out? I'm willing to try again, really.
No, Josh, the way you and Lily treated me, I don't think there's any going back from that. He fell silent, seemingly out of arguments. I finally felt that my words had hit home.
I guess I never thought it would come to this.
That's because you took me for granted. Both of you did. I hung up, realizing I'd said everything I needed to say. Over time, I stopped checking for messages, knowing there was no need to revisit the past. I started focusing on myself, enjoying the peace that came from knowing I was free from their expectations. Lily eventually dropped out of her university plans and started working part-time. I heard that she'd been struggling with reality, but was learning some valuable lessons about independence. Josh, on the other hand, drifted between jobs, occasionally reaching out for one last favor. I never responded. I had given them enough chances, and it was time for me to move forward. I even adopted a rescue cat, finding joy in the small moments of companionship and comfort it brought. With each day, I found new purpose and contentment, knowing I'd made the right choice. I no longer felt the need to support those who couldn't appreciate or respect me. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly free. It seemed my quiet son, whom I once thought might remain a bachelor forever, finally found his first romance just before turning 36. When I first met her, a polite young woman named Emily, I was immediately taken with her. Watching them climb the steps toward marriage felt like a natural progression, and I was more than happy to support them along the way. But our days of happiness were soon interrupted by tragedy. My beloved younger sister Ellen passed away unexpectedly. Emily's behavior changed drastically after that. As I was dressing for Ellen's funeral, Emily entered the room with a steaming pan of food and filled it onto me, saying,
"If you're leaving, don't bother coming back."
Shocked, I simply replied, "Fine." While Emily returned to her family home, I took the opportunity to remove all her belongings and sell the house. When she found out, I received no reaction, only a cold silence. My name is Sarah Thompson. My husband passed away 9 years ago, making me a widow at 52. Since then, I've lived with my pride and joy, my son, Michael, who works at a prestigious company. Michael is incredibly kind and compassionate, unable to ignore someone in need. He's shy and finds it hard to say no when asked for help, which often leads to others taking advantage of him. One incident from his elementary school days still stands out to me. Michael was part of the science club, responsible for watering the school's flower beds. Duties were split among the members on a weekly rotation. Even after his assigned week ended, Michael continued coming home late. Concerned, I asked him why. "Michael, why are you still coming home late?"
I'm doing the watering shifts again this week.
His classmates had asked him to cover their shifts with excuses like having tutoring or stomach aches. Michael took their words at face value and agreed to help. I gently advised him, "Sweetie, some people might take advantage of your kindness. Not everyone is as honest as you." But he simply replied with a calm expression,
Even if they're not hurtful, if I can help someone, that's enough for me.
This was just one of many stories showcasing Michael's selfless nature. Despite sometimes being taken advantage of, he also had many friends who cherished his gentle and easygoing demeanor. Michael excelled academically through consistent effort, always achieving high grades. He exceeded our expectations by getting into a prestigious university, graduating without delay, and securing a position at a leading firm where he still works today. Other parents often shared their worries about their children's struggles with school or friendships, sometimes seeking my advice. Compared to those stories, Michael was a model son who even greeted our neighbors politely, making me proud. However, when it came to romance, Michael was quite reserved. He never brought a girlfriend home during his student years and remained single well into his 30s. When his father passed away, Michael was concerned about me living alone.
Mom, I'll move back home so you won't be by yourself.
Despite adding over 30 minutes to his commute, he canceled his apartment lease and moved back in with me. As grateful as I was, I couldn't help but wish he'd find someone special to share his life with. Yet, I lacked the energy to push him into joining dating services or social events, and so time simply passed by. However, just as Michael was about to turn 36, I received some delightful news. I was planning his usual birthday celebration, a simple dinner with his favorite dishes and a small cake from our local bakery. Michael, I'll reserve your birthday cake from the usual place. A small vanilla cake is fine, right?
Actually, could we get a larger chocolate cake this time?
I was surprised. Michael wasn't particularly fond of sweets, and a larger cake seemed excessive for just the two of us. Plus, chocolate cake is richer than vanilla, quite heavy for a dessert. Sensing something, I asked casually, "Oh, are we expecting a guest?"
Yeah, I was hoping to invite someone over. There's someone I'd like you to meet.
Seeing my son blush was a first, and I couldn't hide my excitement. Oh, that's wonderful. Let me know if there's anything they don't eat so I can prepare accordingly. I tried to remain calm so as not to embarrass him, but inside I was overjoyed. The next day, I went to the bakery to reserve the cake and began preparing for this special day, cleaning the house thoroughly and planning the menu. Although I'm 61 and work part-time 3 days a week, I still had plenty of energy to get everything ready. The day arrived quickly. Michael brought home a charming 29-year-old woman. At the doorway, she bowed deeply and introduced herself with a warm smile.
Nice to meet you. I'm Emily Davis. Thank you for having me over today. I'm sorry if it's an imposition.
Oh, not at all. We're thrilled to have you. Though you could have spent Michael's birthday just the two of you.
Actually, I insisted on meeting you.
From what Michael had told me, they'd been dating for about 6 months. Emily's birthday had already passed by the time they met, so this was the first special occasion they'd celebrate together. After inviting her in and settling down, Emily handed me a neatly wrapped gift from a paper bag.
Michael mentioned you have a sweet tooth. I hope you like these.
Oh my, you shouldn't have. May I open it now? With her nod, I unwrapped the package to find an assortment of high-quality chocolates.
Since Michael isn't big on sweets, I thought you might not buy them just for yourself.
Oh, that's so thoughtful of you. Thank you. I'll enjoy them dearly. Her sincere gesture and polite demeanor immediately endeared her to me. Michael watched her every move with a smile, clearly smitten. We moved to the dining table, and our small birthday celebration began in a warm and lively atmosphere. Since my husband's passing, meals have been simple, and the table often felt too big for just the two of us. But tonight, with a table filled with dishes and the addition of Emily, it felt lively and full. Eating together felt less like a routine and more like a joyous occasion. Michael seemed to have a bigger appetite than usual, and Emily praised my cooking as she ate heartily, which relieved me. The pleasant conversation flowed until Emily's eyes lit up at the mention of our home.
I'm sorry if it's forward, but I was so excited to see your home. I insisted Michael bring me here.
Oh, not at all. We're happy to have you.
Oh, this is such a beautiful house. It's older, but the design feels modern and sophisticated. I've always loved looking at real estate ads since I was little. Nowadays, browsing home magazines is a hobby of mine. Homes like this are rare to come across.
To us, it was just our familiar home, but Emily seemed genuinely enthusiastic. She spoke rapidly, a stark contrast to her earlier calm demeanor. Michael chuckled softly, perhaps accustomed to the side of her after 6 months of dating.
I'm pretty boring, with no real hobbies, so I find her passion really charming.
He looked at her with adoration, and I held back from interjecting, not wanting to disrupt their sweet moment. I was simply overjoyed that Michael had found someone he cared for so deeply after all these years. Emily and I got along well from that first meeting, and their relationship progressed smoothly. 6 months later, they decided to get married. Even before their engagement, Emily visited our home every other date, growing quite fond of it. She proposed that we all live together after the wedding. Initially, I hesitated, not wanting to intrude on their new life as newlyweds. Are you sure you want to live together? I wouldn't want to be in the way.
You're very important to me as well. Please, I'd love for us to live together.
Moved by her genuine eyes and words, I agreed. I'm thrilled. It feels like I'm gaining a daughter. Let's always be honest with each other to avoid any stress. If anything bothers you, please tell me.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be accepted not just by Michael, but by you as well. I'm truly fortunate.
Tears welled up in both our eyes. It was the ideal relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law that I had always dreamed of, but never thought possible with my shy son. I was confident we'd have a harmonious life together, but reality turned out to be not so simple. For the first 3 months of living together, Emily was thoughtful and respectful. Michael had met her through a work connection, as she was a contractor at one of his company's clients. Even after the wedding, Emily chose to continue her job, though it meant commuting for about an hour each way, longer than Michael's commute. Unlike me, who worked part-time 3 days a week, Michael and Emily had demanding full-time schedules. I had more free time, so I suggested I could manage dinners. Since I have extra time, would it be alright if I handle dinners? We didn't have a 2-kitchen setup, so sharing space and cooking for everyone seemed practical. I thought it might relieve them both from additional household stress. However, I did worry it might be too forward, considering Emily might want to prepare her husband's meals herself. Emily, though, smiled and shook her head.
Oh no, that's wonderful. I appreciate it so much. Your cooking is delicious, and I often get home too late to make dinner myself.
Her response reassured me, and I began preparing not only dinner, but also lunch for both Michael and Emily. I even took on more of the cleaning to make their lives easier, avoiding their laundry, assuming they'd prefer to handle that themselves. In the beginning, Emily would join me in the kitchen every morning, helping with breakfast and always thanking me for my efforts. But after a while, she stopped coming downstairs early. I understood that the long commute might be exhausting her, and maybe she needed more sleep. Without her joining, I continued making breakfast alone. A week later, though, Emily casually sat down at the table, already set for 2.
Since it's not your work day, I'll go ahead and have your portion.
She ate my breakfast portion and left for work, catching me by surprise. The next day, she did the same. After that, I began making 3 portions instead of 2. Then, Emily and Michael decided to sleep in separate bedrooms, which was unusual for a newly married couple.
I can't sleep well without my own space.
They both had their rooms, so I adjusted, moving to the smaller spare room. Emily had the master bedroom, the largest room in the house. She'd eat the lunches I packed and bring home an empty container, but her attitude changed. During dinners, she'd silently finish her food without offering to help with the dishes. She'd retire to her room after meals, leaving me to tidy up. The quiet dinners felt somewhat hollow without her earlier enthusiasm. Michael noticed her changed in attitude, and he started helping with breakfast preparations and even the bathroom cleaning.
If you don't want to do housework, I'll take care of it. But could you at least try not to look so unhappy all the time?
He tried to gently address her behavior, but she didn't respond. Michael tried having conversations with her, but she seemed uninterested. During this time, my only sister, whom I cherished deeply, was hospitalized. Having lost both parents, my family now consisted only of Michael and my sister. I rushed to the hospital after receiving the news and informed Michael and Emily as I went. Michael quickly left work to join me, but Emily's response was indifferent. Michael sat beside me in the waiting room, comforting me as we waited. Medical staff moved in and out of the emergency room, a flurry of activity heightening my anxiety. Eventually, a doctor came out with news.
I'm sorry to inform you, but your sister has passed away.
My heart sank. Michael and I cried together, overwhelmed with grief. Michael's aunt had been a beloved presence in his life, and he was deeply affected. In that moment, I hoped Emily would step in to offer Michael some comfort. Unfortunately, my hope was in vain. When Michael called her to share the news, she responded coldly.
Mom, Emily says she's not coming. She even said this has nothing to do with her and that she won't attend the funeral.
Hearing this, I was stunned. How could she say that? This is family. I was heartbroken, and even Michael was left in tears by her insensitivity. My sister had remained single all her life, so I was in charge of her arrangements, with Michael helping. We were already overwhelmed with grief, and Emily's attitude added to our burden. For the next 3 days, we busied ourselves with the funeral preparations, pushing thoughts of Emily's coldness aside. The day before the funeral, I decided to address Emily. Emily, I understand if you don't want to attend the funeral, but I'll be staying at my sister's place for a while to handle her affairs. Please look after the house. Emily didn't respond, and I left to change for the funeral. Michael had already taken his clothes to my sister's house and would meet us at the funeral. Suddenly, I heard the door open behind me without a knock. Emily entered the room, carrying a pot of hot oil. Emily, what are you doing? She approached me with a cold smile and tipped the hot contents over me. Ow! What on earth? I managed to dodge most of it, but the bottom of my dress was splattered with the scalding oil and pieces of seafood. That could have caused serious burns. Emily just laughed, showing no remorse.
Oh, so you do know what this is. I thought it might be a little fancy for someone like you.
She laughed again, her words dripping with sarcasm. I couldn't believe her audacity. Why did you waste all these ingredients if you wanted something different for dinner? You could have just told me.
Oh, don't you get it? I'm sick of living with you. You said you stay at your sister's place, so don't come back.
Fine. With that, I stormed out, stunned and shaken, throwing a scarf over the stained part of my dress. As I left, Emily shouted after me.
Don't bother cleaning up either. This house will be mine soon enough. I'll be at my parents' while you're gone.
Tears streamed down my face as I rushed to the waiting taxi. I made it to my sister's home, my emotions still reeling from Emily's actions. I changed into one of my late sister's dresses for the funeral, a bittersweet reminder of our close bond. During the funeral, I focused solely on honoring her memory, putting aside the turmoil with Emily. Once the service ended, Michael and I talked about everything that had happened. Michael, she could have seriously hurt me. I don't know who she's become. Michael looked deeply hurt, and his usual calm demeanor broke.
Honestly, Mom, I've been doubting this marriage for months now. After the service tomorrow, we'll figure out what's best for our future.
With a heavy heart, we decided to focus on the immediate family responsibilities and leave thoughts of Emily aside for now. 2 days later, we said a final goodbye to my sister. Once settled, we returned to the house, only to find everything exactly as we left it. Emily hadn't returned, so Michael and I made a decision. We'd move out and clear the house of all non-essential items, including Emily's. We brought most of our personal belongings to my sister's home, deciding to dispose of the rest. I found a notebook wedged between the mattress and bed frame in Emily's room. I debated reading it, but ultimately did, hoping to understand what had caused her to change so drastically. Inside, I discovered shocking entries revealing her motives. Emily had always wanted to live in a large, beautiful home, and Michael's family house had been the reason she pursued him. She wrote about feeling bored in the marriage, having aimed solely for a comfortable lifestyle. I realized Emily had deceived us from the beginning. With a clearer sense of her intentions, Michael and I proceeded with the house sale we'd planned earlier. Within 5 days, we packed, sold the house for a real estate agency, and fully relocated to my sister's place. The pace of our actions helped keep our minds occupied amidst grief, a small blessing given the circumstances. I even felt grateful to Emily in a strange way for pushing us to move forward. Just as we settled in, I started receiving persistent calls from Emily. After ignoring her for a few days, I decided it was time to respond and face whatever confrontation lay ahead.
So, what's the big idea? I come back and the locks are changed?
Her voice was furious, a far cry from the person who once smiled in our kitchen. I'm no longer in that house, Emily. We sold it. I'm living at my sister's now.
What? You sold it? That was supposed to be mine!
She erupted, accusing me in a barrage of angry words, her voice filled with outrage. It was clear that reasoning with her over the phone was pointless, so Michael and I arranged to meet her in person to discuss the divorce. Emily's father, Tom, joined the meeting as well. In person, I realized how much I'd been projecting my hopes onto Emily. Her kindness had been a facade, and I had believed it because I so deeply wanted to.
So you only married me to live in a house like ours, didn't you?
Emily didn't deny it.
Yes, I grew up in a tiny apartment and always dreamed of living in a big, beautiful house. When I met you, I thought, why not?
Tom looked deeply uncomfortable hearing his daughter's admission.
I see. So you were never really interested in me, were you? Let's proceed with the divorce.
Michael's voice was calm but firm, clearly ready to move forward. Emily showed no remorse or regret. Then I brought up something I noticed during our move. We found that one of my husband's architectural idea books was missing during the packing. I hope you didn't take it, Emily. Emily's demeanor shifted immediately, a hint of fear crossing her face. Tom intervened, suddenly gripping her shoulder.
Emily, if you took that, return it now. There's no reason to steal from your family.
Emily hesitated, but eventually confessed.
Fine, I took it, and I share some ideas with an architect I know.
Her indifference to the betrayal left us all stunned.
Apologize now, Emily. Give it back and apologize.
I displayed photos from a private investigator showing Emily with another man. You are only dishonest with us, Emily. You were seeing someone else the entire time. Emily's affair had come to light, and there was no denying her actions now. She claimed she found Michael's kindness boring and had sought excitement elsewhere.
Emily, this could have been a stable life for you. Your choices have cost you everything.
Emily, seething, deflected blame.
You're just bitter, all of you. How could you give away the family home out of spite?
The house was never for you, Emily. My husband designed it, but he would have wanted it sold, as he himself once said. We moved forward because we needed to. Michael and I exchanged a quiet look, sharing a sense of peace with our choice. Emily's claims didn't matter anymore. We had chosen our path and would continue without her negativity.
I'm so sorry, everyone. Emily, apologize now.
Michael and Emily's divorce was finalized soon after. Michael opted not to pursue any further financial settlement, wanting only a quick and clean end. For a time, Emily continued calling, but we moved on without engaging further. I knew that someday Michael might find someone who valued him genuinely, and until then, we'd continue as we always had. A strong family, resilient and true to one another.
I wish my wife could just stay buried. Then, all of Amy's assets would be mine, and I could live carefree every day.
Wow, that's so low, Nathan. Don't worry. Eventually, everything will be yours since you'll outlive her. That's the advantage of marrying older women.
True. After all, I took her in, so I should get some perks. As I listened to my husband and his family's inappropriate remarks about my late father, something broke inside me. I left the room in silence. I stepped outside. I took a deep breath of the cold air, and I made a life-changing decision. My name is Amy Stamper, a 29-year-old stay-at-home wife. I currently live with my husband Nathan, who's 3 years younger than me, in a house in the suburbs. I first met Nathan at a wedding of a mutual friend. I wasn't particularly close to the bride, but she insisted I come, so I couldn't refuse. Since we didn't share many friends, it was more like I was there to make up the numbers. I went quietly congratulating the bride while chatting politely with the other guests. After the reception, I was about to head home when someone called out to me from behind. "Excuse me, could I talk to you for a moment?" Surprised, I turned around to see a young man out of breath, Nathan. Though his sudden approach startled me, his sincerity persuaded me to stay. At first, I didn't see him as a romantic prospect. After all, he was 3 years younger, which felt too young for me at the time. Unaware of my hesitation, Nathan enthusiastically shared many things about himself. He worked at a securities firm and aimed to move into management. His youthful ambition and drive felt refreshing, and I gradually became interested in him. From that day, Nathan started reaching out more frequently. At first, we'd go for casual dinners or movies, but his steady interest never wavered. Although I felt uneasy about our age gap, his sincerity gradually won me over. Nathan was sensitive to my feelings, always taking things at my pace without pressuring me. Then one day, he confessed his feelings in a serious tone. "Amy, I know you're concerned about our age difference, but you're the one I want. No matter our age or how far apart we are, I want to be with you." His words went beyond simple affection, showing a genuine commitment to our future together. In that moment, the age barrier I had put up crumbled. Nathan's determination moved me deeply. We started dating, and 6 months later, he proposed. I accepted his proposal without hesitation. I could clearly see a future with him. Marrying Nathan marked a significant turning point in my life. With marriage, I transitioned to being a stay-at-home wife, and my life changed drastically. The biggest change was moving in with my in-laws, as we began living in Nathan's childhood home. Living with us were Nathan's mother, Emma, a stay-at-home mom, and his younger sister, Mary, a college sophomore. Initially, we planned to find a place of our own, but soon after, Nathan suggested we live with his family. Nathan's father had passed away a few years prior, leaving his mother and sister to manage the home alone. Though independent, they both struggled with the absence of a steady presence in the home. As the eldest son, Nathan felt it was his duty to step up and support them. His dedication to his family made a strong impression on me. Though I had reservations, I respected Nathan's wishes and agreed to live with his family. I wanted to support Nathan's desire to care for his family, and I believed building connections with his family was important for our future together. Living with Nathan's family took some adjustment, but gradually I settled into the new routine. Nathan made an effort to support me, balancing his busy work schedule while helping me communicate with his family. Yet despite this, I often felt a heavy weight in my heart, especially when interacting with my mother-in-law, Emma. Emma, now in her 60s, was generally cheerful and friendly, but her comments often had a sharp edge. She would say things in a light-hearted tone, yet I couldn't help but feel a sting each time. At first, it was over something minor as dinner. One evening, I decided to try a new recipe, hoping the family would enjoy it. Nathan and Mary often complimented my cooking, so I thought a fresh twist would be welcome. But Emma's reaction took me by surprise. "This soup isn't as good as usual." She frowned slightly and put down her spoon. My whole body tensed. "Oh, I'm sorry. I tried a different seasoning. Did it not taste right?" I smiled, trying to brush it off, but deep down, I was filled with worry. Emma continued in her usual light-hearted tone. "No, it doesn't suit my taste. I think your usual light soup is better. I thought you were supposed to be a good cook, but maybe your creativity is lacking." "I'm still learning." I kept a bright expression, but her words left a dull ache in my heart. Though Emma didn't mean it unkindly, I couldn't shake the hurt each time she made these remarks. "I'm the straightforward type, so please don't take it the wrong way." She would say this often, unaware of how much her words affected me. One evening, I shared my feelings with Nathan after he came home from work. "Your mom can be really harsh sometimes. I know she doesn't mean any harm, but it still gets me down." Nathan considered my words, then tried to reassure me gently. "That's just how she is. She may come across strong, but she genuinely relies on you, which is why she says those things." His words helped a little, but the uncertainty in my heart didn't fully lift. I often wondered if I would ever find a way to connect with Emma without feeling overwhelmed by her comments. Living with Emma was challenging enough, but there was someone else who often tested my patience, Mary, Nathan's sister. At 20, Mary was bright and cheerful, often filling the house with her lively personality. However, her playful pranks were sometimes more than I could handle. Shortly after moving in, I realized how mischievous she could be. One day, while I was folding laundry, a sudden, ear-piercing bang sounded behind me. Startled, I let out a scream, only to turn around and see Mary grinning with a confetti popper in her hands. "Did I surprise you?" "You think?" My heart nearly stopped. "Please don't do that." "Well, I don't know. Your reaction was hilarious, though." I tried to protest, but Mary just giggled, clearly amused by her prank. Her antics continued over time. She would switch off the bathroom lights while I was showering, or surprise me with fake bugs. The worst prank happened when she pretended Nathan had been in a car accident. With a solemn expression, she handed me her phone and told me in a somber voice, "Amy, the police just called. They said my brother was hit by a truck and is in the hospital." "What? That can't be. Hello? Hello? This is Amy, Nathan's wife. I heard my husband was in an accident." But there was only silence on the other end, followed by uproarious laughter. I turned around to see Mary clutching her stomach in hysterics. "Amy, you really thought it was real? Seriously? As if the police would call me first." "Wait, all of this was a joke?" "Yeah, joke's on you." She laughed as I sank to my knees, overwhelmed by relief and disbelief. That evening, I finally confided in Nathan about Mary's pranks. "Nathan, Mary's pranks are getting to be too much. Today, she pretended you were in an accident." "An accident? Mary did that?" "I'll talk to her, but honestly, that's just how she's always been." Nathan laughed it off, though I could hardly see the humor. In that moment, I realized he wasn't going to take my concerns seriously. Realizing I couldn't rely on Nathan to address Mary's antics, I resolved to find my own ways to cope with her behavior. One day, a major disaster struck a neighboring town. The news covered scenes of destroyed homes, closed roads, and people huddled in shelters. Watching these heart-wrenching images, I felt a wave of sadness and sympathy. But Nathan's reaction was a shock. "Whoa, this looks like a movie set. They really got some good shots here." I stared at him in disbelief, unable to comprehend his detached response. And then Emma chimed in with a casual comment that left me speechless.
Wish it would flood around here so we could get insurance money and rebuild the house. My heart sank even further as I watched their indifference to the real suffering happening around us. Mary joining the conversation throughout her own absurd ideas. If we're rebuilding, let's make it a 3-story mansion with a pool and a barbecue area. Wouldn't that be great?
Don't get ahead of yourself, Mary. Maybe start with a basic emergency kit instead. Food prices might go up, you know.
Emergency supplies? How boring.
Sitting there, listening to their nonchalant chatter, I felt hollow. To them, this disaster was merely an inconvenience or a distant event. While I couldn't stop thinking about the people who had lost everything, just as I was coming to terms with the vast difference between us, I received a devastating phone call. My father had passed away. It felt surreal. He had been ill, but his passing came far too soon. At his funeral, I barely spoke, clinging to my mother as she wept uncontrollably. My older brother Mike took charge of the arrangements, guiding us all through the overwhelming grief. Nathan and his family attended, but I noticed they only stayed on the sidelines, treating it as if it were merely another obligation. The grief of losing my father was already unbearable. What happened afterward broke me completely. When I finally returned home, drained emotionally and physically, I heard voices from the living room. Nathan, Emma, and Mary were laughing and chatting as if it were any other day. So, Amy's dad must have left her some decent inheritance, right?
The casual way he spoke about my father's passing left me frozen in the hallway. She's probably inheriting some property at least. Talk to her brother, Nathan. Make sure she gets a good share. Imagine how easy life would be with that rental income. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Forget managing properties. Why not use this money for something fun? I've always wanted to go on a world cruise. We could do it, right?
Actually, yeah, that sounds great. And I'd love to finally book first-class flights.
Let's go all out. I'll book the best hotels. Their callous conversation left me feeling numb. My father had just passed, and all they could think about was what his death could mean for them financially. But Nathan's next words cut deeper than anything else.
If only Amy would pass away too. Then all that money would be mine, and I'd be set for life.
Mary gasped, then giggled. Oh my God, Nathan, that's so awful. Well, he is right. He'll likely outlive her anyway. That's the perk of marrying an older woman.
Exactly. I took in a woman past her prime. A little reward wouldn't hurt.
I felt something inside me crumble, and a cold clarity took over. Without a word, I turned and walked out the door, inhaling the crisp night air to calm myself. But no amount of deep breathing could dispel the heavy feeling of betrayal and loss. I had tried to make things work, to respect Nathan's family for his sake. I had endured Emma's cutting remarks and Mary's relentless pranks. But this, listening to them plot to use my father's death for personal gain, and to suggest that I was merely a financial asset, I couldn't accept it. With the clearest resolve I'd ever felt, I realized that I couldn't continue living in this house. I had to leave Nathan and his family, for my own peace and my father's memory. Not knowing where else to go, I found myself at the train station, phone in hand. My brother Mike was the only person I trusted, the only one who might understand. Taking a deep breath, I sent him a message. Mike, I need to come home. Can we talk? After sending the message, I felt a small sense of relief, a glimmer of hope. A few moments later, Mike replied, his words lifting a weight off my shoulders.
Of course, Amy. Come home whenever you need. I'm here.
Tears filled my eyes as I read his response. With Mike's support, I knew I could finally face the truth. The next day, I returned to Nathan's family home one last time, this time accompanied by Mike. I had told Mike everything the previous night about Nathan's family's heartless comments, their constant disrespect, and my decision to leave. Mike listened without interruption, nodding in understanding and encouraging me to make whatever choice would bring me peace. Now, standing at the front door, with him beside me, I felt a strength I hadn't felt in a long time.
Amy, remember, this is your life. Just say what you need to say, and we'll leave together.
Thank you, Mike. I rang the doorbell, and Nathan opened it, visibly surprised to see us standing there together. Amy, Mike, what's going on? I took a deep breath and, steadying my voice, spoke directly to Nathan. Nathan, I can't live like this anymore. I want a divorce. The room fell silent. Nathan looked at me in shock, processing my words. Wait, what? Divorce? Where is this coming from? I overheard your conversation last night about my father's inheritance. I've been trying for so long to be a part of this family, but last night was too much. You showed me that I'm just a means to an end for you, nothing more. Nathan looked around uncomfortably, clearly grasping the severity of the situation. Now wait a minute, Amy. You've misunderstood. We were only joking last night. There was no harm meant in what we said. Surely you're overreacting. Yeah, you just lost your dad. Maybe you're not thinking straight. Their excuses sounded hollow, and I could feel Mike bristle beside me. Whether you were joking or not, your words cut deep. I can't stay in a family that treats me and my father's memory this way. Nathan turned to me with desperation in his eyes, reaching for any way to salvage the situation. Amy, please don't do this. We can talk it out. I didn't mean anything by it. But I felt nothing for him anymore. No attachment, no sympathy. At that moment, Mike intervened. Nathan, Amy has made up her mind. Trying to convince her otherwise is pointless. Also, as you know, I'll be taking over my father's company. This means I'll be ending our business relationship as well. What? But we can keep business and personal life separate, can't we? Business relationships are built on trust, and right now, there's none left to give. Nathan was speechless, his face paling as he realized the weight of Mike's words. For years, my father had trusted Nathan's firm to manage our family's finances. Now, that trust was irrevocably broken. Mike continued with calm confidence, underscoring the finality of his decision. We'll be moving all our assets to a different firm. I'll have the paperwork sent to you this week. Nathan, visibly distressed, looked from Mike to me, panic flashing across his face. Amy, please, I can't lose you, or this account. It's too late, Nathan. My decision is final. I deserve a life with respect and peace. Goodbye. I turned and walked away, not looking back, knowing that this was the start of a new chapter. In the weeks that followed, Mike helped me finalize the divorce, bringing closure to a painful part of my life. Nathan, stripped of his business account and abandoned by his family, suffered the consequences of his actions. His company reputation took a hit, and he was reassigned to a small branch far from the city. Emma and Mary also faced consequences. Expecting a windfall from my father's estate, they had spent extravagantly, only to find themselves in debt. Unable to repay the loans they'd taken, Emma was forced to work part-time, a shock for a woman who had never worked a day outside her home. Meanwhile, I had started rebuilding my life, feeling more confident than ever. I was reconnected with an old manager from a previous job who offered me a position back in the workforce. Grateful for the opportunity, I accepted. It felt like fate, giving me a fresh start just when I needed it most. I finally felt free to live on my own terms and build a future filled with happiness and dignity. This was the beginning of a new journey, one that I would walk with a clear heart, grateful for the family that truly stood by me.
He left, saying he had life-saving work to do, leaving me and our 1-month-old daughter behind. My husband's recent actions made me uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that he might be cheating, but I couldn't bring myself to ask him. Until that day, I'd kept quiet, but I finally decided to confront him. I headed to the airport for my revenge. Then I overheard a conversation that shattered me.
She's such an idiot. Now we can finally enjoy ourselves, just the two of us.
Seeing my husband laughing with his ex was the final blow. All my pent-up anger exploded at that moment. The flight to hell was about to begin. My name is Mia, 28, and I'm a flight attendant who loves the time I spend in the sky. I've known my husband Josh since high school, and we've been together for 10 years. We were so close back then.
Someday we'll get married.
I still remember those words clearly. We enjoyed each other's company, envisioning our future together. When we got married at 25, people said we were the perfect couple. But things slowly changed after marriage, especially when we struggled to have a child. One night, I sat at the dinner table alone, watching Josh prepare to go out. "You're going out again tonight?"
Sorry, a colleague invited me out. Don't wait up.
His responses were always short, as he rushed out. Recently, he'd been going out more often. "Isn't it becoming a bit frequent?" Josh barely acknowledged my concern before heading out the door. I watched him leave, feeling a growing emptiness in my chest. I kept telling myself we needed to talk, but even when we did, nothing changed. Friends would urge me to leave him, but I just shook my head. I knew, but I couldn't let go. Maybe I still loved him. Even though I couldn't understand why I clung to him, I couldn't let go of someone I'd spent 10 years with.
Is it because you still love him?
I didn't know what to say. The idea of losing Josh scared me. One day I found out I was pregnant. "Josh, I'm pregnant!" I was thrilled and told him right away, hoping things might change for us.
Really? That's great.
He seemed surprised, but his smile was faint. "Aren't you excited?"
Yeah, I guess so.
"If it's a girl, I think Lily is a cute name." His lack of enthusiasm made me uneasy, but I still hoped he'd change once we had a family. Unfortunately, that hope was crushed. Despite the pregnancy, Josh continued coming home late, spending less time with me. "Will you stay home more when the baby's born?"
Well, when work slows down, sure, but I'm really busy now.
His responses felt empty. Preparing for the baby on my own, I began questioning why I was in this situation. Maybe I was reaching my limit. Friends kept urging me to leave, but I still couldn't take that step. One night, I finally confronted him. "Why are you so indifferent? I want us to be close like before."
It's not that I don't care, but work is exhausting, and honestly, it's hard being home.
His irritated words left me speechless. Was home no longer a place for him? Was it my fault? Tears welled up, but deep down I knew I was reaching my breaking point. I still wonder why I didn't leave then. Maybe it was because I still loved him. But now things are different. I've decided to move forward for my daughter's sake. I would stop hoping for change from Josh. But just when I made that decision, he did something that left me speechless.
Mia, I have to go to Japan on a business trip.
He sounded almost proud. "Japan? When?"
In about 2 months.
"But our daughter will only be a month old by then." I acted surprised, but I was already laughing inside. Japan? It was obviously a lie. He's just a regular office worker.
The company took on a big project, and I was chosen.
He elaborated his lie. I watched him, noticing how he touched his nose, a habit he had when lying. "Are you sure, Josh? You don't even speak Japanese."
No, there'll be translators, and I know enough like yes and no.
Watching him fumble, I barely kept from laughing. "Josh, you're in sales, right?" He froze, touching his nose again.
Yes, but this is different. More of a top-secret project.
His words became more absurd. I almost admired his poor lying skills. "Well, don't push yourself too hard. Take care of your health." I didn't press further, knowing it was pointless. More than that, I wanted to avoid unnecessary stress for my daughter's sake. Still, his childish lies and his obliviousness to how obvious they were left me disappointed.
Are you sure you'll be okay alone?
"Oh, I'm fine. I'll manage just fine without you." My response was laced with sarcasm, but he didn't notice. Josh went on about his trip preparations. I was past caring where he was really going or what he was planning. With each passing day, I felt my love for him slipping away.
If anything happens while I'm gone, let me know right away.
"Don't worry. Focus on your work." I responded calmly, masking my newfound resolve. I knew exactly what his Japan trip was, but I refused to be dragged down by it. I'd moved on, ready to live for myself and my daughter.
I'm heading out.
He left with a smile, once again touching his nose. I watched his back, letting out a small sigh. His words meant nothing to me anymore. A trip to Japan? What a transparent lie. I started digging into his actions, convinced he was on a trip with someone else. I felt restless as I searched, trying to piece together the truth. Who was he following? Who was he messaging? Checking his connections on social media, I noticed a familiar name. Lisa, his high school ex. She was infamous for dating multiple guys back in the day. I was certain she was the one he was meeting. I created a fake profile using an AI-generated photo and sent her a friend request. She accepted within hours. I was right. I found posts about her upcoming Japan trip with Josh. How could he plan a vacation with her when our daughter was almost due? At that moment, I knew our marriage was over. I was ready to let him go. The day finally arrived. Labor pains started, and I prepared to go to the hospital. He'd asked me to notify him, but I had no intention of calling. A nurse asked if I wanted to call my husband, but I calmly replied, "No, he's enjoying his time elsewhere." I delivered my daughter alone, channeling all my anger into strength. My daughter was born healthy. Holding her in my arms, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She was worth every struggle. A few days later, I returned home. Josh was waiting, surprised to see me.
I'm glad everything went well.
He held our daughter for the first time, looking both nervous and moved. And just be gentle, I guided him, watching him struggle with her tiny form. But something in his voice sounded empty.
She's cute.
The words lacked sincerity. I felt a disconnect. He was going through the motions. My mind was already elsewhere, focused on my own plans for Japan. I decided to join him in Japan, but my trip had its own purpose. I asked my mom to watch Lily, explaining I wanted to attend my mentor's final flight. Mom agreed, though she seemed curious. I was grateful for her support. "Josh, I'll be joining you in Japan for 2 days."
Oh, sure.
He had no idea of my real intentions. Little did he know I discovered his plans with Lisa. It felt like fate, a sign to take action. The day of the flight, I watched him board the plane. I took a deep breath and silently said goodbye to the man I once loved.
See you soon.
With no suspicion, he left for the airport. Once at the airport, I disguised myself to avoid detection. I saw them laughing together, acting like they were the only two in the world. When I boarded, my seat was directly behind theirs. Perfect. Thank you, universe, for this perfect position. I settled in, ready for what was to come. After takeoff, their conversation drifted back to me.
She's clueless, isn't she?
Let's just forget about her and enjoy ourselves.
Rage bubbled up, but I stayed calm, signaling my flight attendant friend, Marina. She knew the plan and had agreed to help. So what's next? Just make sure they get extra special treatment. Marina smiled, knowingly, ready to play her part. I returned to my seat, thinking through my next steps. Observing them, I noted the carefree way they spoke about me, ignoring any repercussions. This was just the beginning of their descent into a nightmare. And with that, my revenge plan was in motion. I steeled myself, waiting for the right moment. Soon, Josh and Lisa began complaining to Marina and the other flight attendants about everything.
Why is this plane shaking so much? Can't you fly it more smoothly?
He was annoyed by a bit of turbulence, as if the crew could control the weather.
I'm sorry, sir. Weather is beyond our control, but we are prioritizing safety and will ensure the smoothest flight possible.
Marina's calm professionalism only seemed to fuel his irritation.
Well, I expect us to arrive on time. No delays.
Yeah, we're in a hurry.
I rolled my eyes at their entitlement, feeling a surge of anger as they continued to demand impossible accommodations.
We apologize for any delay due to weather. Your safety is our highest priority.
Josh and Lisa, however, were relentless.
Can't we at least move to business class for free?
I'm sorry, but business class is reserved for guests with prior reservations. We'd be delighted to have you book business class next time for an enhanced experience.
I admired Marina's composed responses, her subtle deflections adding to my satisfaction as I watched them grow more frustrated. Their complaints continued, now about the cabin temperature, claiming it was either too hot or too cold.
For those who feel chilly, we have blankets available, and we can also offer cold drinks for anyone feeling warm.
Her unshakable professionalism was flawless, and I mentally applauded every one of her responses. At last, Marina walked away, and I knew it was time for my next move. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I watched Lisa stand and head toward the restroom. This was my chance. I discreetly followed her, carrying a juice cup as part of my plan. My heart raced, but I stayed calm, knowing every detail needed to be perfect. As she reached the restroom door, I pretended to stumble, spilling the juice all over her.
What the hell?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Her face turned bright red as she looked down at her stained clothes, clearly in shock and furious. I couldn't help but smirk inwardly. What are you doing here? Lisa looked up, locking eyes with me, her expression shifting to one of utter disbelief.
Mia? Why are you here?
That's my question. She stood frozen, unable to find words, clearly never expecting to see me. Perfect timing. Marina approached with a towel for Lisa, who reluctantly took it and dashed into the restroom. Now alone, I seized the opportunity, grabbing her hat and jacket, which she'd left nearby. I put them on, steeling myself as I made my way to Josh's seat, channeling my anger into a calm facade. Josh was gazing out the window, oblivious to my approach. I slid into his peripheral vision, masking my voice to mimic Lisa's.
So, how are things with Mia?
Josh glanced my way for a split second before turning back to the window, answering nonchalantly.
I'm only with her because her family's well off. It's not like I love her.
His words pierced me, confirming all I'd suspected but hadn't wanted to believe.
What about Lily? You must care about her, right?
I kept my tone steady, trying to pull the truth from him.
I don't know. She's just a baby, so I don't feel anything yet.
I felt a swell of rage and sadness, his lack of connection to our daughter more painful than I expected.
Don't you love her?
He hesitated briefly, then replied without any emotion.
I don't know if it's love. She's just cute because she's a baby.
My heart shattered in that moment, but I had one last question.
What about Mia? Do you love her?
Josh finally looked at me, giving me a dispassionate gaze.
No, I don't love Mia.
Those words were the final nail in the coffin, my love for him dissolving into profound bitterness. But I had to be sure.
Do you love me?
At last, Josh seemed startled, staring at me with confusion.
I love you, Lisa.
I almost laughed at the absurdity, at how little he truly understood me. His face paled as he finally realized who I was.
Mia?
Surprised to see me? My gaze was cold, but inside I felt triumphant. He was too shocked to speak. His face drained of color.
It's not what it looks like.
He stammered, but his words were hollow. I simply glared back, letting him feel the weight of my silence.
I don't feel anything for Lisa. I swear it's just physical.
His pathetic excuse only deepened my disgust. Physical? You told her you loved her. He fumbled, words failing him as I delivered my final blow. I'm done, Josh. I stood, removing Lisa's hat and jacket, leaving him utterly speechless. Just then Lisa returned, frozen at the sight of me standing between them. Marina, sensing my cue, offered me the empty seat beside Josh, turning our row into a witness to his lies. With one last glare, I whispered, Let's discuss what you were really planning.
What's going on, Josh?
Lisa's anger flared, realizing Josh had lied to both of us. Yes, an adult relationship, just like you both wanted. The flight descended into tension as both sat, humiliated and defeated. As we neared landing, I took out a recorder, playing the incriminating audio of Josh's betrayal for all to hear. Passengers whispered, and Josh's face turned even paler. Some passengers even voiced quiet encouragement to me.
You said you'd leave her for me.
Goodbye. I had no intention of staying in Japan. As soon as we landed, I turned my back on them, knowing they'd be left to sort out the mess. Lisa decided to return to the States immediately, facing a costly, last-minute ticket change. Josh, left behind, had to pay for his hotel and expenses alone. Take care of everything on your own from now on. Josh remained silent, defeated. I felt triumphant, knowing my plan had worked perfectly. The next day, I boarded my return flight, ready to witness my mentor's last flight. I celebrated his final journey, feeling my own life taking a new direction. Back home, I filed for divorce, securing custody of my daughter and planning for the future. Josh was forced to leave our apartment, unable to keep up with his expenses. Meanwhile, I was ready to move forward, free from his lies, focused on building a happy life with Lily. This ordeal had strengthened me. No more getting dragged down. From here on, it was just me and Lily, facing a bright future together.
I'm ending this for you today. Go join your parents in the next world and live happily there.
A harsh, sloshing sound filled the air as gasoline drenched my head, filling my senses with its stinging smell. My mother-in-law Elena, smiling with twisted delight, discarded the empty gas can. My whole body reeked of gasoline as it dripped off me and seeped into the asphalt beneath my feet. I hadn't expected this. Certainly not when she abruptly stopped the car and dragged me out on our way to the crematorium. The cold wind stung, but I held on to the framed picture of my parents, clinging tightly.
Your parents deserve better than a disgraceful daughter-in-law like you by their side. So let me do them the honor of sending you off, joined with their real daughter. She pulled a lighter from her pocket, smiling in a way that revealed her madness. The pungent gasoline fumes burned my eyes, and the chill in the air sank into my bones. I closed my eyes, apologizing silently to my parents, and clutched their photo tightly. I could almost see their sad but comforting smiles. The gasoline soaked through my clothes, stinging my skin with a biting intensity. Maybe I really was a terrible daughter. I wasn't even there in their last moments. A wave of guilt and regret crushed my heart, rendering me speechless against her accusations. So, you neglected your real parents. Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. A worthless daughter raised by worthless parents.
She sneered, fiddling with the lighter in her hand, producing a rhythmic and ominous clicking sound that grated on my nerves. I knew I had no defense. It hurt even more, feeling completely defeated. The small flame flickered in the wind, speeding up my heart with every sway.
You always put on airs like a perfect daughter-in-law, but really, you're worthless. No one loves you.
Her cruel smile froze my very soul. If only I'd been a better daughter. If only I'd cherished my parents more. Regrets swirled like a dark cloud inside my chest.
But it's too late now.
She took a step closer, igniting the lighter's flame. The dancing fire reflected in her eyes, filled with unhinged delight. But then, a single image flashed in my mind. Without thinking, I bolted, running with all my might while clutching my parents' photo to my chest.
Where do you think you're going?
Her shrill, screeching voice rang out behind me. Covered in gasoline, I ran as fast as my legs could carry me toward a single glimmer of light in the distance. My name is Mina Taylor. I'm 39 years old. I work as an assistant at a medium-sized company. Though my title is minor, I handle crucial duties, managing everything from accounting to administrative work. It's my previous job experience that's valued, but sometimes I feel it's little more than extra, unpaid labor. 6 a.m. on Monday, the city lights outside the 4th floor window start to dissolve in the dawn of spring. From another office, the soft hum of the copier starting up fills the quiet space. This is my favorite time. This stillness is sacred to me. My eyes fall on an expense report, where an unusual sequence of numbers catches my attention. The report is by Sam Walker, a younger employee who seems to be getting close with my husband, Jack. The numbers appear aligned at first glance, but years of experience reveal signs of clear fraud. Here, another one. The pattern is familiar, like past cases I handled. Old instincts from my days in corporate fraud prevention kick in as I highlight the evidence. Perhaps all that time I spent rooting out fraud was meant for this moment. 8 a.m. The elevator chimes, and a familiar voice reaches my ears. I find myself straightening up, instinctively tense. Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Nice tie today. Sam's voice carries a practiced sweetness, sounding somewhat staged.
Thanks. Oh, did you finish that report I asked for yesterday?
Jack's voice has a warmth in it I don't hear at home, a softness reserved for someone else. It sounds like simple conversation, but anyone can see the closeness between them. Jack walks by my desk, treating me as if I were invisible. Lately, this has become the norm, both at home and at work. I hear my mother-in-law's voice in my mind.
She's smart and capable, but no one respects her.
She loves to say that to her friends on her social media, oblivious to what's really going on. My phone vibrates, interrupting my work.
Your mother's condition has deteriorated slightly. It may be best to bring her in for an exam.
My blood runs cold. I'll be there in 30 minutes. As I'm about to leave, I turn and see Elena standing in the doorway, dressed in her flashy business attire. Her rank may be honorary, but she still radiates a commanding presence.
Oh, you seem in a hurry. But remember, we have an important meeting this morning.
My mother's health is declining. I need to... She raises a hand, silencing me.
But what about the 80th anniversary event planning? I've been telling my friends all about it.
The anniversary budget began at $20,000 but has ballooned to $30,000 with her endless demands. Meanwhile, payments to contractors are 4 months overdue, and the phone calls from small subcontractors grow more desperate daily. I can join a bit later. I just need to check on her quickly.
So, real family comes first, right?
Her words slice through me. Another Facebook notification flashes across her screen. Blessed with a wonderful daughter-in-law. It's another one of her deceptively saccharine posts.
Mom's right, Mina. The company has to come first.
Jack's voice echoes behind me, his tone as cold as ever. In his hand, he clutches a report prepared by Sam. Does he truly understand the falsified expenses it lists? Or is he testing me to see if I'll react?
Anyone seen the receipts from last night?
My father-in-law, Lance's loud voice fills the hall, no doubt fresh off another disastrous client meeting. His breath carries a stale hint of alcohol, a smell that's become all too familiar. He's started drinking even during work hours now, and the bills from his favorite bars stack up on my desk. The reality of this company, despite its 80 years, is a crumbling structure hidden behind a carefully maintained facade. Excessive expenses, poor management, and hidden fraud, the company's flaws run deep. Just yesterday, yet another contractor reached out pleading for overdue payment. I feel weighed down as I walk back to my desk. A new message lights up my phone screen.
Don't push yourself too hard, honey. Your happiness is what matters most.
My chest tightens, knowing Mom is sending what little encouragement she can offer, given everything. My vision blurs with tears. Just then I catch a glimpse of movement at the edge of my sight. Sam is at the cabinet in the finance office, hurriedly gathering documents with a strange, nervous energy. Later that day, the extended family and company staff gather at a formal conference room. The room exudes an air of seriousness fitting for the event, with elaborate decor and a large, formal setup. Afternoon sunlight filters through the high windows, casting a serene glow over the scene. Jack's parents sit at the head table, observing everyone with an air of authority. The only sounds in the room are the soft clinking of teacups and murmured greetings.
I'm terribly sorry for the wait, everyone.
Gaze flickers to her phone, a faint sigh escaping her lips. Her phone screen shows a group chat titled Ladies of Distinction. In the chat, she's already posted a few photos of herself in today's outfit. The delay was due to my parents, who couldn't get here sooner because of the lack of available care staff. Just as I try to explain, Elena's phone chimes loudly with a notification.
Another like. My Facebook post seems popular today.
She glances at her post, which reads, blessed with an amazing daughter-in-law and a harmonious family. In truth, she's only met my parents a handful of times, and our last interaction was over a year ago.
Hey Mom, let's get a photo for Instagram.
He responds to a message on his phone as he reaches for her, and a flash of can't wait to see you tonight pops up on his screen. The sight makes me turn away. My phone suddenly rings, breaking through the noise in my mind. Hello, this is Mina Taylor. My heart sinks as I listen to the voice on the other end.
Your parents were in an accident. An ambulance is on the way.
I nearly collapse, struggling to stand. Elena's grip suddenly tightens on my arm, keeping me seated.
You can't leave right now. This gathering is important to the family.
There's a twisted pleasure in her voice, as if enjoying my misery.
She's right, Mina. They're in an ambulance. They'll be fine.
My hands shake as I settle back into my seat. From behind, I hear someone whisper,
So ungrateful. Neglectful daughter, really.
The comment stabs at me. Meanwhile, Elena places her arm around me in a fake show of comfort, her actions capturing applause from the surrounding relatives. Nearly 2 hours later, as the gathering draws to a close, my phone rings with another unknown number.
I'm terribly sorry, but despite all efforts, your parents did not survive. They lost too much blood.
My knees give out as the news sink in. Beside me, Elena pulls out her phone, typing away eagerly, her face alight with interest.
At least you won't have to worry about their care now, Mina.
She types a message to her group chat. Finally freed of that burden. I feel lighter already. In moments, replies flood in. You're so kind, thinking of others. Rushing to the hospital, I find my parents' bodies cold, lifeless. A paramedic relays my mother's last words to me. She said, "Don't worry about us. Go live a happy life." My mother's final message to me, urging me to live for myself, fills me with a bittersweet ache. After their cremation, I return to their home, where I find an old letter from my father's college friend, George Crawford. He's now a successful CEO of a large construction firm. The letter details a promise made between my father and George to look after me should anything happen. For years, George has been offering our family the support we needed but never asked for. That night, Jack comes to the house, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up as he speaks.
Now you can focus on the family business.
Alone in my father's study, I clutch George's letter, finding solace in its words. Little does Jack know I've been preparing for this moment. I have everything. Evidence of Sam's embezzlement, Jack's mismanagement, and proof of Jack's affair. I open my computer and send it all to George, my heart steady with resolve. In response, a message appears from George.
Ready whenever you are.
I look at the insurance policy my father left behind, solidifying my decision. No one can hold me back now. The next day at the crematorium, I sit with my family, waiting for the final service. Elena suddenly dumps a bucket of gasoline over me, a cruel smile on her face. She leans down, whispering with feigned sympathy.
Now your parents can finally rest.
My clothes soak with gasoline as she smirks, expecting me to shatter under her cruelty, but instead I calmly get up and walk out. Outside, I run to a nearby fountain and dive into the water, letting it wash away the stench and the gasoline she drenched me in. I emerge, soaked but freed from her poison, feeling an unfamiliar lightness. Nearby, Elena screeches, trying to spin the story for onlookers, claiming she only meant to comfort me. Her act no longer affects me. My heart feels calmer, even as her pretense unfolds around me. I wring out my clothes, my mind filled with one final promise to my parents, to live a life that honors their love. Back inside, the quiet sound of the cremation service concludes, and my mother-in-law's phone buzzes nonstop with notification. Even in this moment, she can't stop posting, sharing her twisted narrative of events for anyone who will listen. A few days after the service, early morning light fills the finance office as I finalize my plan. I review each file, documenting every instance of fraud meticulously. Falsified expense claims, inflated invoices, double accounting entries, evidence of Sam's and Jack's betrayal. This time, they won't escape accountability. With a click, I transfer all the files to secure locations, including George's custody. In moments, the walls they've built around their lives will come crashing down. When Jack arrives at the office, he's holding a luxury gift bag. A present, no doubt, for his mistress. He greets me with a smug expression, oblivious to the reckoning about to unfold.
Morning. You're up early, Mina.
I respond briefly, knowing he has no idea that today marks the end of his charade. An hour later, the office starts buzzing with nervous energy as Sam is nowhere to be found. Phones ring and whispers fill the air as staff members begin speculating.
I can't reach her. No response on her phone, and it's straight to the voicemail.
I know where she is, of course. She's on the run, evading both her debts and the aftermath of her fraud. Shortly past noon, the company's compliance officer and legal counsel arrive, grim expressions on their faces. They bring with them thick files, the documents I had so carefully prepared.
We have a serious issue of non-compliance and fraudulent activity here. This may affect the company's future operations.
Jack's face pales as he glances over at me, sensing the gravity of the situation. But it's too late. The investigation has already begun, and every detail of their misconduct will be uncovered. My father-in-law stumbles into the room, still smelling faintly of alcohol, bellowing in confusion.
What's all this? Who authorized this meeting?
Legal counsel reveals a diagram connecting all the fraudulent transactions, showing just how deep the rot goes. Elena, fixated on her phone, suddenly gasps as she realizes that news of the scandal has started spreading across social media.
Oh, this can't be happening! Look, they're posting about us!
Her hands tremble as she reads a flood of comments and shares exposing her deceitful posts alongside the truth of the family's scandal. Former employees and vendors are sharing stories, each one painting a clearer picture of the company's corruption. That night, Jack's rage echoes in the small apartment he now shares with his parents, having lost their home and nearly everything else. For a moment, I feel nothing, just a quiet, calm satisfaction. 6 months later, my own life has transformed. I'm now a corporate consultant, building a promising career with George's guidance. With my father's life insurance supporting me, I stand confidently, shaping a future on my terms.
I have to say, Mina, I'm genuinely impressed with how far you've come in such a short time.
I couldn't have done it without your support, George. We stand in George's office, overlooking a cityscape painted in soft afternoon light, both of us feeling the peace of long-fought battles won. As I place flowers at my parents' resting place, one autumn morning, the gentle sunlight makes them glow. I'm reminded of their unwavering love and resilience, gifts they passed on to me to carry forward. With a newfound sense of peace and purpose, I smile, ready to embrace my future. Thank you, Mom and Dad. I'll keep moving forward. The journey to this point was fraught with darkness, but ahead, I see nothing but light.